Hello, everyone. My name is Yvette Edwards, and I am the co-founder for San Francisco Parent Action. I want to welcome and thank all of you for joining us here today for this very important conversation about the future of education in San Francisco, and in particular for our public schools in our community. Today, we are honored to have Mayor London Breed joining us. She will be talking in a few minutes. But first, we wanted to share a little bit about who we are, why parent advocacy is so important, and also why all SF residents play an important role in ensuring that our public schools will thrive. So let's get started. Next slide, please. In 2020, SF parents began connecting amid the COVID-19 education crisis in ways we hadn't before. Many parents came together to advocate on behalf of their children, feeling as if they wanted to be heard and really wanting to uplift their voices on behalf of their children. In general, there were many families who were very frustrated with SFUSD and the dedication to our children. So together, parents wanted to do something to ensure that our school board was once again focused on students. Next slide. Many parents were feeling frustrated, many children were struggling, and obviously a lot of parents were feeling unheard by school board members. The pandemic really shined a light on some very, very important information. It really shined a light on how our schools and our school board were functioning for far too long. So being mindful of the fact that not one group can represent all parents, this particular diverse network of parents came together to center student needs and ask for a better path going forward. Next slide. How are we doing that? That's the big question, isn't it? Here at SF Parent Action, we are proving that if you organize families to get involved, if you educate and empower families to influence district and school level policy, and if you mobilize families to vote for student-centered leaders and inform the broader community, that would be you, then hopefully SFUSD will adopt more student-centered policies and practices, resulting in better and more equitable student outcomes. So what is the real problem? We live in one of the greatest and wealthiest cities in this country, and we have been failing our children. So moving forward, how do we handle that? Next slide. SFUSD was struggling long before the pandemic. In particular, our Black, Latino, and high needs students were less likely to meet achievement levels as their peers. Given some of the data that we have here, you'll notice that San Francisco Unified has been falling below the achievement level given the comparison to the state of California. Next slide, please. For the most part, the data has made it abundantly clear that SF's extended pandemic closures cause particular harm to our most underserved students and for the youngest students within our district.
So, parents did not have a political voice in San Francisco until recently, but develop a political voice we did. This picture is from the night of the recall election, and you see some real raw emotion here that was built up after a year and a half of being shut out. Parents ignored by our school board and kids literally shut out of their classrooms. Our city, thanks to many of you here, overwhelmingly voted to recall our school board, and they showed up. You showed up for our kids. We found what can happen when parents do use their voice, and most importantly, when the broader San Francisco community is paying attention. This recall was historic, but we can't let it just be history and just a one-time thing. Parent advocacy can continue to make a difference for our schools and our students, especially when we can convince you, San Francisco voters, to come along with us. After the recall, we got a new school board, thanks to the mayor, who we'll hear from shortly. Blaney Matomedy, Lisa Weissman Ward, and Ann Shu, since they started in March, have truly turned around our school board. At board meetings now, discussions focus on student learning and student achievement. That shouldn't be so shocking, but after this last school board, it is. The new commissioners are focused on fixing our budget, on equity and excellence going hand in hand, and on addressing the unfortunate teacher payroll crisis that you've probably heard a lot about in the news. Lainey and Lisa in particular, the two pictured on the right, have been particularly sensitive to the needs of all of our students, and we were proud to endorse them through our organization this cycle. And it's also true that all three of them have been focused on turning things around and righting the ship, getting our district back on track. Their accomplishments. So they've only been in office for about 6 months, but since they've taken office, the school board hired a new superintendent who we think will be great for the district. They just passed a new governance policy that keeps the board focused on student outcomes and following effective recommended board management practices. They developed a high school task force, so they're not just focused on Lowell and returning merit-based admissions, which they are, but also all of our 12 high schools and the full portfolio of opportunities that we're offering to our all of our high school students. They're working on rebuilding trust and meeting and talking with teachers and families, and they're actually listening. And next week, they're going to be releasing a new plan, their vision, values, goals, and guardrails plan, focused on literacy, math, student wellness, and career and college readiness. Things are headed in the right direction. So what's next then? Public school families can't turn the district around on our own. There's already another school board election upon us, and we need all of you and your friends and your neighbors to do this with us. One of the recalled commissioners, Gabriela Lopez, is actually trying to get her seat back. And let me be clear, that would be a disaster for our students. So pay attention and think about our 50,000 public school students when you vote, just like you did in February. Oops, let me just go back there. Yeah, so now I'm actually going to pass it over to, before we hear from the mayor, I'm going to pass the mic over to Seth Brenzel for a few minutes so that you can hear from a former public school parent who has decided to stay very active in this parent advocacy about why he's made that choice. Seth Brenzel, welcome, and please take it away.
Oops, I need to unmute myself. There we go. Thank you everybody for coming today. I'm really grateful for those of you who are spending time with us. And thank you, Meredith, and thank you, Yvette. It has been a great honor and privilege to get to work with you both over these last couple of years, brought together through this pandemic crisis in education in San Francisco. And everybody at SF Parents, I've just been so inspired by all the work that everybody has been putting in together. It's been quite a 2 years. And as Meredith and Yvette have outlined, we learned a lot about the past dysfunction at our school board during the pandemic. I certainly did. And yet I'm not deterred, because all of our San Francisco school children deserve the very best school district in the United States. There's no reason that we can't be the very best. I stay involved, even though I'm now a parent of a child in an independent school, and like many of you may have made choices to be in public school for a while and then to a parochial school or private school or any number of educational choices. But I stay involved because SF Parents is focused on excellence and equity and in the education for all of our San Francisco Unified School District students. And the very important task of lifting up and empowering parents, caregivers, and families to advocate for their kids. We saw so much during the pandemic that family voices were excluded, or some family voices were excluded, some were included. And we really are focused on every family in San Francisco who has a kid in the district being able to express what they need from the district and education. So I really resonate greatly with the mission of the organization. You all know this, San Francisco, we have the best weather, the best, well, maybe not today, but the best weather, the best views, the best vistas, the best libraries, the best parks, some of the best hospitals and educational institutions in the world. Our school district should be right up there with all of those things. And SFUSD should be garnering headlines for the excellence and equity that it delivers for its school district and not its antics. I stay involved because I want San Francisco to be a city, a school district, and SFUSD to be a school district of leaders and not of laggards. There are many excellent and equitable things happening in our school district today. Some of you know that you're in schools, your kids are in school. My kid had a wonderful experience at her elementary school as well. Teachers and administrators, educators and staff are working hard for and on behalf of school children every day. So that is happening, and we know that. But we're here today to really talk about why and how important it is that SFUSD belongs to all of us, whether you are a current parent, teacher, or a student in the district, or not, whether your kid is at a private school or a parochial school or in a charter school or in some other kind of independent learning situation, whether you're a past parent in the district, maybe you're a future parent, maybe you're simply a concerned citizen in San Francisco. It's very important that we all pay attention because we all need to pull together for our San Francisco Unified School District. That's what's meant by a public school and public education. It's part of the public good, and we all have a shared responsibility for it. Our school board is voted in by all of the voters in San Francisco, not by simply people who have kids in the district or did or will. It's all the voters in San Francisco vote for all of the commissioners. And the funding for SFUSD comes from our public funds. We all have a role to play. We need our school board to be boring. We need it to be focused on governance and policy, supervision of its only employee, the superintendent, its fiduciary responsibility with the $1 billion in public funds for which it is the steward, and focused on the educational outcomes of every student in the district. And most recently, it has been doing just that. It has been such a breath of fresh air. If you want to join our efforts and help, there's going to be a link in the chat where you can reach out to SF parents to stay involved in whatever way makes sense to you. We have an important election coming up with a very long ballot. Please join me in paying close attention to the citywide election for our Board of Education. Our 50,000 San Francisco Unified School District school children are counting on us to pay attention. Our city is counting on us. So, speaking of our city, I want to now turn it over to Mayor London Breed, who is with us today, and who was with us in the very early days as we, as a group of parents, not sure what to do, were trying to advocate for a safe as possible reopening of SFUSD. When all of the private and parochial schools were open because the Department of Public Health said it was okay. And Mayor Breed was with us. She helped us learn to advocate for ourselves and to help us lift voices up of parents all throughout the district. And we are so grateful for her support then, her leadership during the pandemic, and for her time with us today. So please join me and welcome Mayor Breed.
It's great to be here. It's great to see some of you. I know it's been a little crazy with so much happening in the city. And I just want to express my appreciation to all of you for staying actively engaged, for really caring about our students and how we make changes to this system for the purposes of making sure that the kids are the focus. Sadly, sometimes things continue to be very political. And this is an entity, I think, that's really focused on trying to make things less political and focus more on what needs to be done for the school district. And it's so interesting because I've had a lot of discussions with a lot of kids who said, I wish the grownups would stop fighting. And I'm sure you probably have heard that from your own kids too. Like, it's really become unfortunate and sad. And my hope is that after this election, we can hopefully get the 3 members that I appointed elected, and we can continue to focus on the important work that the school district needs to do. There's a new superintendent who wants to get back to the basics and really make sure that quality education is at the forefront of what the school district does, that they get the money under control in terms of how they manage their budget. I, of course, have made it clear to the new superintendent that I want to be a partner. I want to work with them. And I really want to make sure that, we have a solid relationship, and that also includes having a good relationship with members of the Board of Education. What's at stake here? A lot is at stake here. I know that we had a setback with Anne and her comments that were very hurtful to members of the African American community. I think that, you know, at this point, I mean, I appreciate that she immediately recognized what she did wrong and she apologized. And unfortunately, it was turned into something it shouldn't have been, but that's politics in San Francisco. But now there's a lot at stake here. We have other candidates that are running that could set us back considerably, even one who was recalled. And to me, that says a lot about how that person thinks and how much more important it is for us to just really focus on making sure we're out there campaigning, communicating to not just parents, but non-parents, as parents, how important this race is and how we need them to vote and support the candidates that we know are going to be focused on helping to move our school system forward. I mean, I'm sure I'm telling you something that you don't already know, but we have to think bigger picture here. It can't be about personality. It can't be about drama. It can't be, well, I like her and I don't like her. It has to be really some level of consistency with the whole package, because if not, the worst could happen and we can end up with a member of the Board of Education that was already removed. So that's what's at stake, along with other, of course, challenges around other races, the DA, the District 6 supervisor. I didn't ask for these recalls. I didn't ask to be in a situation where I had to make appointments. But when you take the job as mayor, it is your responsibility to try and make the best decision for the people of the city. And I feel strongly that through the processes that I've had for school board selection, for District 6 supervisor, and for the district attorney, that I was very thoughtful and I tried to listen to a diverse group of people. A lot of people said in most cases, even though they range from so many levels of the political spectrum, they all said the same thing. You know, they want our schools to focus on our kids. They want our streets to be safe. They want public safety to be at the forefront of everything that we deal with in San Francisco at this time. And so my hope is that based on my feedback from people in San Francisco, that many of these folks will, I mean, they have been doing a great job, but I'd like for them to continue to do this job, and your support is critical in helping to make that possible.
Thank you, Mayor Breed. We had a few questions come in when folks registered for this event that we wanted to ask you. We had a question from Peter come in. The school board needs members that are fiscally responsible. Will this be a #1 priority?
Oh, definitely. Thank you, Peter, because a laundry list, I had a whole line of questioning, and I had more than 1, 2, sometimes 3 meetings with people. Part of the conversation had to be around fiscal responsibility, including, you know, being realistic about whether or not we have the capacity for all the schools that we do have, and just really looking at the bigger picture. How are we going to make our schools better? And how are we going to make sure that, you know, financially, we're not just throwing money away? So I think, you know, part of Anne's background and her understanding of finance was a big reason why I thought she'd be a really great member. And Lainey was another person that talked a lot about, you know, the financial health and well-being of the school district. And in fact, what you all know is, in comparison to most other school districts, the city, you know, the county is very generous to its public schools, and we want to make sure that money is being used appropriately and invested in the right places. So it's at the top of mind. And I think many of the folks who I have been able to appoint are going to continue to focus on that.
Great, thank you. And then Virginia asked, how are we going to get parents in San Francisco to be confident in enrolling in SFUSD so that we shrink the 30% of kids in private school?
I say that takes time. I think once this election is behind us and we see that the school district, especially with a new superintendent, is moving forward in a more responsible direction, I think that's really going to give a lot of people confidence. I don't know if it's going to happen this coming school year, but I think next year, if things continue in the way that they have been, I think people are going to feel really good about the schools. I think there'll be some really great announcements around a number of programs and initiatives and changes that the superintendent is planning to make. And so it has a lot to do with the leadership. It has a lot to do with the leadership working together, with my office to help address some of the financial challenges and really improve just the feelings of, the educators and the students, within the schools. So I think that's going to take us a little bit more time, but I think we'll get there if we especially can get the 3 members that I appointed elected to serve a full term.
Thank you, Mayor Breed. I don't know if you have any time for any more questions, but we can continue to stay on with folks and answer a few more of those.
Yeah, I could answer just a few more questions, no problem. That's what I came for.
All right. Well, we were also, before you joined, we were addressing a question that came in around the budget, and specifically, and you touched on this, Mayor, about how locally we always pass money for schools, right? And we're probably going to pass the Student Success Fund in November, right? That we know you worked on with, you were in communication with Ronan's office as they worked that out, and we're pretty sure voters are going to support that. Everyone here better vote for it. But what else? Historically, California underfunds public education. So what else can we do to increase funding for our schools, our teachers, increasing our teacher salaries so they're more competitive, so we can retain our teachers? What else can we do?
Well, I think part of what we have to do first is to get our finances under control. I think there's a lot of financial dysfunction going on in the school district and how money is being wasted and how it's being spent. And so in my conversations with the superintendent, the goal is to have a better understanding of the financial conditions and to make some hard decisions about things within the school district that need to be addressed, and to look at what we're spending money on. So there has to be assessment. And, ultimately, my goal is to make sure that they don't continue to run a deficit. And I will work with the superintendent, as I have with all the other superintendents, to ensure there isn't a deficit. When we talk about increasing resources, and yes, the Student Success Fund, we work with the supervisor. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of it's somewhat restrictive too. It's not going to help us with the real challenges around, teacher pay and a couple of other issues with the school district. I'd rather allow the school district to have more flexibility with the resources that it uses, especially if it's being fiscally responsible. So I think, we have a little bit of work to do to get to a better place. And, I can't tell the superintendent what the superintendent needs. I want the superintendent to express to us, and working with the school board to let us know what is needed. And I want a better understanding of that before we start making plans about adding more money. There's PEEF. There'll be potentially the Success Fund, which has a layer of requirements that will make it maybe even challenging to access for the school district. But ultimately, my hope is that we can deal with the deficit first and make some adjustments, and then look at the future and how we start to think about funding our schools. There's also this whole statewide conversation. I think there's money coming in for community schools. And I just feel like we keep inventing these things instead of trying to make what we have stronger. But we'll take what we get and we'll try to make adjustments.
Thank you. Okay, maybe sneak in one last question for you before you go. Do you know about your the appointees' stances on? Well, we sort of know, but can you talk more about your appointees' stances on like math and literacy and, the actual student learning and getting our district back on track. Before you arrived, we shared some data on our poor student outcomes, particularly the achievement gap. That's the stubborn gap in our district that has not closed and, is only widening. What can we do? And do the appointees have a plan for addressing especially math, literacy, and career and college readiness?
So I'm not sure if they have a plan, but I did have conversations with all of them about it. And I've had conversations with the superintendent. And I know that, I don't know if it's public yet, but there's a big contribution coming in for literacy specifically targeted at African-American students. And there are some plans around programs to deal with the disparities, right? With particular students who struggle. So I know that that is being worked on. Those programs supposedly existed before, but they were never really effective. And I think that the goal is to really target a lot of those kids who are struggling at an earlier age, and to not just, send them to the next grade, even though they may not be prepared, but to also make sure that that comes with a more detailed level of support to allow for that child to get the help and the support that they need so that they're not left behind when they're moving from grade to grade. So there have been a lot of conversations about the achievement gap, a lot of conversations about plans to target, literacy and math. I, in fact, funded support for the math program, including, I think that included the 8th grade algebra too. So I think the investments in specific programs that are necessary to support the achievement gap is going to be critical. In fact, I was of the understanding that many of the beacons and these other things that we pay for were supposed to be those things that did that, and they have not been as effective as I would have liked them to be. But I think that there's been promising data for this more intensive math curriculum. I don't know what it's called off the top of my head, but that's a program, like I said, that we're expanding to other elementary schools, and I put money in my budget to do so. My plan is to do everything I can to work with the school district to really target those things, but they have to be very deliberate about the investments they make. They have to be consistent, and they have to basically measure it and show the data to determine whether or not it's working. Because I think that's the part that's missing. We invest in all these programs, and there's nothing to demonstrate whether or not what we're investing in is actually successful. So definitely got a lot of work to do, and I'm still hopeful because I feel like the superintendent is very much focused on getting back to basics and getting and targeting the very challenging kids in order to ensure that they have some level of success in our school system. In terms of college readiness, we still got work to do, but I have heard really great things about college track, but again, not a sometimes direct connection between the school district and the programs and organizations. So my desire is to see us make more connections with a lot of the things that we're working with and investing in for student success.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor, for joining us. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We really appreciate all of the support, the early support in particular, that you gave to us here at Parent Action. One question did come in, and I think it's a wonderful one to close on. Catherine was asking, what role do you see parents and caregivers playing in their child's education in the best ways possible? And I think if you could share that with us, since this support that you've given us has really meant a lot, and it continues to be a lot for SFUSD children.
Well, I appreciate that question because I do think, part of the role is, doing the best you can to support and help your child and to recognize when there are needs. Don't hover over your children, though, and make them crazy. But, just paying attention and also being of support to other people's kids. It's interesting because I was having a conversation with a parent who somewhat has really taken over, kind of adopted a kid who has a family with real challenges. And so this kid is her kid's best friend, and she treats this kid just like it's her kid and is advocating and fighting and supporting that child the same as though she's doing the same for her child. So I think the role that parents have, like, especially, I mean, fathers are great too, but mothers are, have been really instrumental in just being those caregivers, those supporters, and those people who not only look out for them. I see Seth like, what about me? I know you're a good dad, Seth. But really, there's a need for us to think about not only taking care of our own kids, but taking care of other people's kids too. Thinking about, what are maybe the challenges in the classroom that an educator is struggling with, and how you, a parent, could be of service, even if it's, because, your kid gets to an age where it's like they do not want you in their classroom. But just because you are not in their classroom, why not still be a part of the school in some way? How do you give back if you can, to help support, our school district and other kids? Because I do think that makes a difference. My grandmother raised me, as I'm sure many of you know, but my grandmother couldn't go up to the schools, right? We didn't mostly have a lot of parents around. But the parents that we did have around, they were thoughtful towards all of us, not just their child, but it was, we all were treated, special, I guess I would say. And I think, some kids are ignored by adults. Some kids, don't even get a hug or, like, how are you doing today? So I think, it's okay to be okay with talking to other people's kids and just really trying to be that person to help support and uplift our children. So I think that could be more meaningful and helpful. And as parents, if you are struggling, reaching out to other parents for help. Reaching out to other people who understand and having the conversations about what you can do, and seeking out each other for advice and support. Because, to me, this network of parents, I know this is about activism and getting our schools on track, but it also should be about supporting each other and supporting each other's children and supporting other children whose parents are not a part of these conversations. So, thank you.
Thank you. That sounds
Thank you
wonderful.
so much.
So thank you so much for joining us today. We really
Of
appreciate
course.
for all of your support and advocacy.
Thank you. Let's get out there and fight and vote and campaign and do everything we can so we can move on and do some great work for the city.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor Breed.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
And everyone, we hope you enjoyed this time together this afternoon, and we hope you learned a lot from us and from the mayor. Please take a moment to fill out the engagement form that Seth propped into the chat earlier. Seth, maybe you can just throw it in there one more time. Thank you. You can sign up to get involved, to get our newsletter, and support us in various ways. I'll just close on one last thing that a couple of folks asked about: a voter guide. We have our endorsements that you can find on sfparentaction.org. There's also an increasing number of groups that are putting out voter guides. Families for San Francisco has endorsements, and they do endorsements of the school board and other candidates who they think are family friendly. Together SF has just launched a voter guide that you should check out. It's not really focused just on children and families, but rather the broader city. Those are just a couple that come to mind in terms of groups that are focused on change and improvement in our city. And we our endorsements, as well as Families for San Francisco, are particularly focused on children and families in the city. Am I missing any, Yvette and Seth? No. Okay.
No, that's
And we will follow up and send you all an email and we'll have those links in there. So any closing, who's closing? Yvette?
I can close. I mean, we want to obviously thank all of you for joining us. There were over, I think, 50 people who participated. Please continue to just do your research, inform yourself, make an informed decision in this next election. And thank you for coming.
Right.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks
Have a
so
great
much, everyone. Stay
Bye-bye.
engaged. See you
Bye-bye.
soon.